There are certain types of villains who aren't defined by cruelty or chaos. They're defined by logic. They argue for evil in ways that make you pause, that make you hesitate, and wonder if maybe they aren't entirely wrong. Their reasoning doesn't shatter under scrutiny. In fact, the more you think about it, the more dangerous it becomes because it starts to make sense. Take Magneto, for example. His ideology is rooted in survival. As a Holocaust survivor, Eric Lencher knows firsthand what happens when a minority is demonized and powerless to defend itself. His distrust of humanity is a direct response to history repeating itself. The films often frame Xavier's dream of coexistence as the right answer, but Magneto's point that humanity will always fear and seek to control what it doesn't understand has weight. His willingness to take extreme measures is terrifying, but besides that, his logic is airtight. Mutants will either take control of their destiny or be destroyed by those in power. The moral discomfort comes from knowing that if you lived his life, you might agree with him. His philosophy constantly evolves with every betrayal, every loss, and every time his cautious optimism is proven wrong. In First Class, we see the younger Eric driven almost entirely by vengeance, hunting down the Nazis who destroyed his family. Charles offers him another path, one built on trust and cooperation with humanity, and for a moment, he allows himself to believe in it. But when that fragile alliance collapses and humans immediately treat mutants as a threat, it cements a pattern that will define his life. Every time he reaches for peace, humanity pushes back with fear and violence. This cycle transforms his anger into something more structured, a long-term plan for mutant dominance, not just retribution. It's fascinating how his backstory fundamentally informs his every decision. His belief that mutants should rule, or at least be prepared to defend themselves by force, isn't presented as a thirst for dominance so much as a survival imperative. Across the X-Men films, the audience is always forced to reckon with a truth. Sometimes his violence is aimed at people who, by all moral measures, deserve it. The tragedy is that Magneto's drive for protection inevitably transforms into the very oppression he sought to avoid. His logic is airtight from his perspective, which is why his rhetoric often sways even Charles Xavier's students. In Days of Future Past and beyond, his motivations take on a grim inevitability. Having lived long enough to see wars and genocides repeat themselves, Magneto no longer fights to win. He fights to ensure that mutants will always be strong enough to survive the next purge. Even in Apocalypse, when he briefly retreats from the world to live a quiet life, the murder of his new family snaps him instantly back into the role of a soldier. By the time we reach Dark Phoenix, Eric isn't chasing conquest so much as carving out a safe haven where mutants can exist beyond the reach of human interference. To him, history is a fixed loop of persecution, and the only rational response is to break the loop by becoming too powerful to oppress. Eric's ideals makes perfect sense when viewed through his lifetime of experience, but the methods required to achieve it inevitably cost him the peace he's been seeking since the very beginning. Adrian Veidt in Watchmen is one of the rare antagonists whose plan actually works. His reasoning is cold, calculated, and in his mind, unarguably correct. Humanity is on a path to self-annihilation, and the only way to avert nuclear catastrophe is through a unifying external threat. He's killing millions to save billions. Pretty straightforward. Veidt is what you may call a utilitarian extremist, willing to bring an end to countless lives in order to preserve the species as a whole. He's the smartest man in the world, and he carries that as both a burden and a responsibility. From his perspective, humanity is locked on a collision course with self-destruction. The Cold War arms race, political corruption, and escalating paranoia are all pointing toward nuclear annihilation. So he starts putting together his plan in the shadows, killing the comedian, staging an assassination attempt, doing exactly what's needed to accomplish his ultimate goal. By the time the heroes even understand his plan, it's already been carried out. Millions upon millions of people are dead, but nuclear war has been averted, and humanity has been scared into cooperation. His victory leaves no room for a clean moral judgment. He committed an atrocity that almost certainly prevented an even greater one. And unlike most stories where the right answer is baked in, Watchmen leaves that answer open because all the other characters, even the ones we view as righteous, can't provide a better solution. This is one of my favorite films that have the villain winning because the film actually allows his reasoning to breathe. He isn't a madman raving about power, he's already a billionaire. Merely a calm, albeit egotistical, articulate strategist who truly believes he's solving the unsolvable. That ending feels so chilling, quite literally, because there's no bargaining, no way to undo what's been done. After the heroes understand his plan, they kind of don't even want to interfere. The horror lies in the fact that his plan does create world peace. It forces the audience into an uncomfortable moral corner. Was he wrong to act, or are we just unsettled by someone willing to make the call that no one else could? The operative in Serenity doesn't see himself as a villain, and that's the point. He knows the regime he serves is deeply flawed, even corrupt, but he believes in its end goal, a universe without chaos. He's a tool, designed to remove anything and anyone that threatens that order. There's no sadism in his actions, only a grim acceptance that building a better world means eliminating those who would destabilize it. He fully expects to have no place in the utopia he's helping to create because it's not meant for men like him. That self-awareness, combined with his unwavering commitment, makes his morality both chilling and strangely admirable. From the moment he steps on screen, he radiates a quiet, almost spiritual certainty. He carries himself like a man who has already weighed every moral cost and paid it in advance. His manner is so composed that you almost forget the brutality he's capable of until he strikes, clean and without hesitation. That restraint makes him more intimidating than any raging warlord, because you sense he's already decided what your fate is before you even meet him. He's not driven by greed, hatred, or ego. He's driven by a deep conviction that the world can only thrive if the dangerous and imperfect are removed permanently. He's indifferent to the suffering he's inflicted upon others because of the unwavering belief that the better world he serves will be worth every life destroyed to get there. In his mind, the tragedy isn't the killing, it's that people can't see why it had to be done. His loyalty to the Alliance comes from a belief that order is the highest good, even if it requires assassinations, cover-ups, and acts of terror. His pragmatism and devotion to this cruel worldview is very realistic. The architect in The Matrix Reloaded isn't interested in human freedom. He's interested in systemic stability. His conversation with Neo reframes the war between humans and machines as a mathematical inevitability, not a matter of good versus evil. To him, the Matrix is the best possible compromise, an imperfect but sustainable reality that prevents total annihilation. His tone is clinical, detached, and infuriatingly logical. The danger of his philosophy is that it makes the rebellion feel like an emotional outburst rather than a righteous cause. If you accept his premise, resistance seems irrational. The architect's introduction is one of the most jarring turns in the Matrix series because it's a dismantling of everything Neo and the audience believe to be true. He speaks in a way that feels alien, likely because his thought process is entirely detached from human sentiment. Every word, every pause is loaded with the kind of existential dread that makes resistance feel almost comical. It's not the booming voice of a tyrant, it's the soft finality of a man telling you the sun will rise tomorrow whether you want it to or not. He embodies cold, dispassionate logic pushed to the extreme. His role isn't to fight the heroes physically, but to explain, with clinical detachment, that choice itself is an illusion within his system. Human rebellion must be mitigated to prevent the total collapse of the Matrix. To him, Neo's struggle is a pre-calculated part of the design, and his worldview strips the rebellion of its romanticism. In his mind, the manipulation of reality is maintenance. He's terrifying because his power is structural, almost as if he's relying on a higher power. The Matrix itself is his body, his weapon, his legacy. You can't punch him, outthink him, or intimidate him, because he has already calculated every variable you represent. For all the rebels' fire and determination, the architect reminds you that they're still operating on a chessboard of his design. No matter how many pieces they take, the board remains his. Anton Chigurh in No Country for Old Men operates on a code that's alien yet consistent. He sees himself as an instrument of fate, removing personal bias from his actions. The coin toss is his way of surrendering moral choice to chance, absolving himself of responsibility while still enacting judgment. Within his warped worldview, he's fair. People live or die based on the impartiality of probability, not personal vendetta. It's terrifying because it strips morality down to something mechanical and inevitable, and in that framework, he's not a madman, he's a force of nature. He sees himself as an agent of fate, a necessary force in a world where chance governs everything. His detached demeanor makes watching his scenes very uncomfortable, but also fascinating. There's a warped consistency to his violence that feels almost philosophical. He spares some, kills others, and always justifies it by his own unbending rules. His ultimate flaw is the abdication of personal responsibility. By blaming fate, he absolves himself of the horror he causes. Dennis Kane in Savages is a villain whose actions are rooted in pragmatism. As a corrupt DEA agent playing both sides of a drug war, his goal is rooted in self-preservation. He operates within a dangerous system and bends its rules just enough to keep himself alive and profitable. Dennis's actions often benefit no one but himself, but they're always logical given his environment. In this world, loyalty gets you killed, and ideals get you crushed. His moral flexibility is a survival strategy, not random cruelty. The reality is that in his position, a lot of people would make the same compromises. His logic is simple but horrifying. In a system where everyone is exploiting someone, why shouldn't he exploit harder, smarter, and without guilt? He views morality as a weakness, a luxury only afforded to people who aren't trying to survive in the underworld. His flaw is that his worldview has no room for empathy. It's a philosophy that justifies any atrocity, so long as it keeps him in control. His argument that brutality is the only language cartels understand exists in the moral gray zone between justice and cruelty. He operates with an ends justify the means mentality that feels uncomfortably familiar in real-world power structures. His methods are reprehensible, but his results make those around him hesitate before condemning him outright. Each of these villains shares a dangerous quality. Their logic holds just enough truth to be persuasive. Magneto's fears are grounded in lived history. Ozymandias' plan actually prevents global war. The operative's loyalty stems from a belief in order over chaos. The architect's understanding of human psychology explains why the system works. Chigurh's code brings consistency to a violent world, and Dennis Kane's opportunism thrives in corrupt systems where morality rarely wins. Their flaw isn't in identifying real problems, it's in assuming their solution is the only one worth pursuing, no matter the cost. They bend morality to fit their ends, redefining right and wrong as tools rather than principles. The result is a kind of pragmatic villainy, where the horror comes from the unnerving sense that, under the wrong circumstances, their reasoning could be our own. Collectively, these characters work because their philosophies have an internal consistency that challenges the audience's moral reflexes. They don't kill or manipulate for sport, they act according to a framework they genuinely believe will make the world better, or at least safer. This through line of flawed, yet coherent reasoning forces us to engage with uncomfortable questions. What if they're not entirely wrong? What compromises would we make in their position? Would we come to the same conclusion if we underwent similar circumstances? By the end, their downfall doesn't come from illogic, but from a refusal to accept that their vision is incomplete. They show us that the most dangerous villains aren't those who lie, but those who tell the truth, just a warped version of it.